All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are with our final radical topic of the unit, and it's solving radical equations. Remember, this is a square root, and so we're going to do all the opposite operations. And the opposite of square rooting a number is to square that number. So, first step here, we're going to add 7 to both sides. We take care of what's furthest away from our variable. Adding 7, and I get 3 equals the square root of 9n. And then remember, like I just said, the opposite of square rooting a number is to square it. So we're going to square both sides. So we have 3 squared is 9, and that equals, when you square the square root of a number, you end up with what's just underneath. So we end up with just 9n. Divide both sides by 9, and you get n equals 1. And there's the answer for number 1. Number 2, just like when you're dealing with other equations, you're going to want to remove what's furthest away on the outside. So here we would subtract 3. We minus 3 over here, so we get 4. Square root of 15 minus n equals 20. Then we can divide, because this is 4 times the square root of 15 minus n, both sides by 4, and we get the square root of 15 minus n equals 5. Now, just like we did over here, if we have the square root of 9n, we square both sides. Here we have the square root of 15 minus n, so we square both sides again. So the square root disappears. I'm going to bring this up here, and we're left with 15 minus n equals 25. Okay? Now, continuing on, we subtract 15 minus 15. Negative n equals 10. Divide by negative 1 so that you end up with a positive variable here, and you get n equals positive 10. And there is our final answer. Okay? Now, square root and squares are opposites. So if you have a situation like down here where you're squaring a value, you can still solve the equation. We're going to start by adding 11 to both sides here. Okay, so negative 2 plus 11 is 9, and that equals n over 4 squared. And then here, the opposite of square rooting a number is to square it. So the opposite of squaring something is going to be square rooting it. So we end up on the right side here, n over 4. And on the left side, we have to remember that I can either square positive 3 and get 9, or I could square negative 3. So just like when you're doing absolute values, we now have we're going to have 2 answers for these problems. Okay? So it's going to be positive 3 equals n over 4, and negative 3 equals n over 4. So to finish this off, we're going to multiply everything by 4, and we get 12 equals n, or negative 12 equals n. Okay, so there's that. Remember, the key here is that when you take the square root of a number like this, only when we're solving equations, not when we're doing simplifying or the multiplying. When we're solving equations, we have to remember that it's a plus and a minus. Last example, over here, we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. That's on the outside. So I have 3k minus 8 squared equals 36. Again, I'm going to square root both sides to get rid of my square. And then with 3k minus 8 equals, the square root of 36 is plus or minus 6. For those of you going on to integrated 3, this is going to be a pretty big concept down the road. So now it becomes our split problem again, just like absolute value. So I have 3k minus 8 equals 6, and 3k minus 8 equals -6. Add 8, add 8, and we end up with 3k equals 14. 3k equals 2. Divide by 3. And we get k equals 14/3. Or k can equal 2/3. And there's the answer there. Okay? So when you have to square a number to get rid of the square root sign, you're going to just square it. You end up with that, whatever number is 9, 12, 15. So there's only one answer. When you have to take the square root, you have to remember that there's two answers. Okay? All right. I hope you found this video helpful.